came really to hold up the rear and to leave out, to sort of fill in any gaps. Well, I haven't been left any gaps, I don't think. And then, of course, as somebody sort of rather ancient that's been around for a while and got a bit of experience of the women's movement, such as it's been in this country. And maybe I'll talk to you a little bit about the women's movement, because it's not a movement that is attractive to working class women. And maybe you can think of some of the reasons why it's not attractive to working class women.
Germaine Greer.
Yes. It is very much dominated by the better off sort of woman. It's one of these curious things that the position of women began to change really as a result of capitalism. The capitalists are out to make money. They very quickly discovered that by employing, whereas men had to be paid a living wage, women were prepared to come in and do the same jobs for much less money, because they didn't have a family, they were being kept, and so they were really only looking to supplement the family income. So the capitalists began to mobilize women to work in rather large numbers. And the result of this was actually to change the structure of society. Women were reintroduced into social production, and this in itself gave rise to this demand for rights for women. We can do the same work, we are doing the same work as men, therefore we demand rights. But of course the average factory woman was working her 18 hours a week or whatever it was, and then coming home to her children. She didn't have a whole lot of time to go out and work in the working class movement, the women's movement, or any other movement. The people who had a bit of time were the more educated ones, the people doing sort of petty-bourgeois type jobs, the teachers, the lawyers, they weren't lawyers in those days, but people, and then of course, or even women who were at home, perhaps rather resentful of the fact that they weren't able to do the same jobs as men in their kind of milieu. And so they would began to demand the right to be educated the same as men were, to have the vote the same as men had, because it was increasingly obvious that it was an absurdity that women shouldn't be treated on an equal basis. But of course, the capitalists resisted. First of all, because if women really were equal, then the whole point of employing them, all the advantages of getting them cheap and all that would all disappear. So, but there is also the force of tradition. Our expectations, the way we think things work, is formed by the past. And if you like, our ideas as to how things ought to be changed are necessarily, quote, theoretical. And some people think that theoretical means, well, not real, really. But we ask for those changes because they have become necessary. Something inside us, the sheer absurdity of the situation makes us realize that things have got to change. But how they change is somewhat chaotic. And capitalism takes advantage of this to create divisions among those whose interests actually and objectively lie in getting rid of capitalism. From the point of view of the working class, objectively, its interests lie in getting rid of capitalism, establishing a planned economy, and gearing everything in the economy for the benefit of the working people generally. It's obvious, it's so clear. And what's more, the working class people, the proletariat, is the vast majority of the population, and they can take these 200 so-and-sos, put them on a bus, drive them into the sea over the white cliffs of Dover, and that'd be the end of it. Why don't they do it? And they don't do it because their heads aren't clear enough. They're muddled, partly the force of habit of the past, but also by the wrong ideas that are dispersed in the movement through various agencies, some of them deliberate and some of them who are just naturally counter-revolutionary. So you can never tell if people are being paid or not. With a lot of them you think, well, I hope they're being paid, because it would be a shame for capitalism to get this service for free. So specifically in the women's movement, as Jyoti has said, the interests of women lie in getting rid of the private property, which has been the whole basis of the oppression of women. It lies in taking away the domestic functions of women that have traditionally just stuck with us, even though society has moved on. The recent research shows that the overwhelming majority of housework and care for children and care for the young, even in Britain today, is still on the shoulders of the women. And the expectation is, if mum's ill, even if it's his mum that's ill, then it's the wife who gives up work to look after her. It's not the husband. So that situation is still there, and it's only really under socialism where there is a clear class interest among the rulers, which will at this point be the proletariat, to say, well, no, we don't want women bogged down in petty, stultifying housework. We will make social provision, which is massively more efficient, both in terms of the resources it uses and in terms of the service it delivers. We want social provision, and we will provide that, and we will make sure that women can contribute fully to the life of society, because we've got some very important jobs to fulfill. In the early stages of the socialist revolution, we want to mobilize every ounce of strength of every single worker to create the society where we can produce everything that everybody needs. Until we can do that, our society will always be unjust, because by definition, we're going to have to say to people, you can't have everything you need. We have to. That's how we are in the lower stages of socialism. It's not a paradise by any manner of means. But what we're going to do is we're going to take out all the stops. We're going to mobilize everybody, every ounce of energy, so that everybody, in a few years' time, we will be able to produce everything everybody needs. And we're not going to waste anybody's labour. But at the same time, we want to make sure that people feel fulfilled in our society, that they actually grow as human beings, that they have access to education and culture and all that kind of thing, and that they're not left to mindlessness and drugs with which the proletariat tends to be fobbed off in capitalist societies. So how do you persuade people not to go for this socialist revolution business, which is in their interests, and instead accept capitalism? And you actually send out into the revolutionary movement little viruses, which will
exterminate them.
Which will encourage wrong ideas, which will prevent unity within that movement. And in the women's movement, well, one of the viruses is, really women are oppressed because men are horrid. And what you really need to do is do away with men. We can have test tube babies. We can all become lesbians.
Oh no, please not.
But when I was young in the women's movement, we went to a conference at Skegness where gay liberation women arrived, and my God, they were these sort of hairy butch females, and they behaved just like the worst sort of predatory man. They actually would try to take advantage of this feminist ideology to more or less force women to allow themselves to be. So I'm upsetting Deborah here. They were pretty horrid, but this was taken seriously at one time. And if you tried to say, well, this is actually the program has absolutely nothing to do with women's liberation. It has nothing to do with the problems of a working class woman who's juggling her family and her job and has all kinds of problems, and which is certainly not going to be cured by becoming gay. Then, of course, oh, you're a homophobe, and people were taken in by this. People are quite gullible in the short term. In the long term, I think they did learn. Another thing that they might come up with is that we women should be more like men, sexual liberation, let's let it all hang out. And all the things that we were a little bit prurient about. I mean, there was actually, I can't say it with a young person in the room, I'm sorry, to give some examples of what these women got up to, but put it this way, it was really awful. So Germaine Greer and people like that were, very much at the forefront of these whole ideas that what we needed to do is to get rid of the old morality and, do our own thing. And of course that chimes in very much with the capitalist or general bourgeois propaganda. Well, we're all out for ourselves. It's, we matter. Or a more subtle version of that is our family matters, and to hell with everything else. So basically these antics, they really gave the women's movement a bad name. Burning your bra, that was something that you were supposed to do if you came into the women's movement. Well, how could any working class woman take that seriously? They regarded these silly girls with contempt. And these silly girls all grew up and became ministers in the Labour governments, So quite honestly, there was nothing to be had there. There was one, she's still around, some ghastly woman, who used to advocate wages for housework. Now, this is an interesting concept.
Sorry, the microphone, you keep on
Oh, sorry. It's wages for housework. And this sounds, yes, that's only fair. Women's work in the home should be recognised. They should get a wage so that they're independent of their nasty, horrible husbands who beat them up and who spend all their wages on alcohol, etc., etc. And it sounds fair enough. But it's actually an anti-communist slogan, because come the socialist revolution, we're saying to women, we will provide social facilities so that you can go out to work, and we shall mobilize you to work in social public industry. And they're mobilizing the people to say, oh no, I'd much rather be at home with my children and I want to be paid for that.
Anyways, that was Oakley.
Sorry, I've forgotten the woman's name. I'm getting old. Selma James, who at the same time, Selma James is sort of running prostitutes collectives and that kind of thing.
London Collective Prostitutes.
Yes. So, all these things which have absolutely no relevance to the lives of the vast majority of working class women. No relevance whatever. And the result was basically that the women's movement died. It became ridiculous and nobody wanted to touch it with a barge pole. We within the movement fought for just the right to put forward the Marxist ideas. And that was denied to us. These ideas are so powerful that they could only deal with us by preventing us from speaking at all. And at Skegness, we were actually assaulted. The microphone was snatched from our hands. We don't want to listen to that. We don't want to listen to that. Well, all the Gay Liberation Front, no, we don't want to listen to that. That's right. And it ended up in a fisticuffs because they actually tried to prevent us to speak. And of course, the minute there's a fisticuffs, then all the people who don't really know what's going on, gosh, these women, these Marxists, these causing no trouble, aren't they? Better stay clear of them. So, this is the kind of thing that you're up against when you decide that you're going to take on capitalism. They're not going to make life easy for you, and you have to give them, you have to be ready for that and think of ways in which you're going to progress regardless of the fact that they're making it difficult for you. But what you have on your side is that capitalism is making life more and more difficult for people. And at the end of the day, you're holding in your hand the only way forward and the only solution. And so you've just got to go with it and insist and insist and insist. And in the end, people will see sense, especially when that sense coincides with their objective interests. And you just mustn't give up. I say, I haven't finished yet. You mustn't give up. And I'll tell you one thing. There are people who think, oh, my family must come first. I can't abandon my children. I can't, and all the rest of it. But what I'm going to say to you is that what capitalism is doing at this moment is not only that, of course, we've got the problems of mass poverty that have been there for a while, but we've also got the problems of constant wars. This Ukrainian business could actually be the start of the Third World War. What's going to happen to our children then if we're not in a position to stop them having that war? And then in 50 years' time, we are going to face a horrible ecological disaster because of the way that the capitalists are despoiling the earth. What's going to happen to our grandchildren, our great-grandchildren? Is it good enough to say, well, you know, I really had to be there at your grandma's bedtime because otherwise, you know, she wouldn't have got to sleep? Or would you say, well, you know, we would have preferred you to have actually done something, left the place of the whole world a better place so that things shouldn't be so difficult and so painful for us. So I think we owe it to future generations to do whatever we can and do that little bit more. And in that context, I'll mention one thing. We know that our comrade Iris is very, very ill. And if you like, I'd like to dedicate this International Women's Day to Iris. She has been a model of the communist woman all her life. There was a time when I went to stay for about a month, I think, with her and Godfrey at her house, and I can tell you, she was working full-time then, and Godfrey was working full-time, and the communist work didn't stop. You got up in the morning, you did a few leaflets before you went to work, you came back and there was more things or a meeting to go to, and it just didn't stop, and that's how it's been all her life. And I don't think, you know, I think I can forgive people if they don't quite live up to Iris's standards, because I'm afraid I don't live up to Iris's standards myself. But I think that's something we should aim for. And the other day, you know, she's very severely ill. She probably won't live very long, but she turned to me and she said, "I've had a good life." And she's deserved to be able to feel, "I've had a good life," because she has. Thank you.